The Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, had just been signed among 12 member countries in New Zealand after 5 years of negotiation. The TPP would go beyond the World Trade Organization commitments in areas such as intellectual property protection, foreign investment protection, and environmental and labor regulations. These made trade negotiations more complex and difficult. In Vietnam, TPP has been covered a lot in different kinds of media. However, it's essential to have a more quantitative-based, more specific approach to this topic. Therefore, we invite to our studio today Dr. Scott Murray from the University of Canberra, Australia, who has been researching the impacts of free trade agreements on countries like Vietnam for the past 5 years. He and his colleagues applied math and built economic models to come up with results and solutions for Vietnam. But first, let's take a look at a clip reviewing the negotiation process and signing of TPP.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, will only come into effect when at least 6 member states, equal to 85% of the GDP of the 12 signatory members, ratifying the agreement. This also means TPP must be passed by the legislatures of both the US and Japan.
Japan is a newly joint member, but I believe with strong momentum toward Prime Minister Abe's policies. The promotion of TPP is consistent with the policies and guidelines of Japan.
We are working with our stakeholders, we're working with members of Congress, we're working with the leadership of Congress, educating everybody as to what's in the agreement, addressing their questions and concerns, and I'm confident at the end of the day, because of the strong benefits to the U.S. economy, which have been estimated to be over $130 billion a year of GDP growth, as well as more than $350 billion of additional exports.
Many countries have begun to vote on ratification of the TPP. Australia and Malaysia are 2 of them.
Our government submit to the state president of Vietnam, and the later will submit the agreement to the National Assembly for ratification. In any case, I can assure you that we need less than 2 years period of time to finish and to conclude and to end with the ratification of this agreement.
Another issue of concern is minimizing the gap between countries within TPP so that developing countries like Vietnam can meet the commitments outlined in the TPP.
It would be useful to help countries like Vietnam and others meet the obligations that they have taken on under TPP. So we look forward to working with all of our trading partners to ensure that they have the technical assistance necessary to be able to fully implement.
Within the next 2 years, Vietnam hopes to see some of the benefits that the TPP offers. As one of the founders, Vietnam will also have the privilege to set the rules if new countries such as South Korea, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand consider joining.
Dr. Scott Murray, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
First of all, could you tell us more about your research, your methodology and results related to the impacts of TPP on Vietnam?
What we do is we divide the economy up into sectors, 52 sectors in our case, and you look at the outputs from each sector and how much of that becomes the input to each other sector. So, for example, you would look at the total output of rice, and you could then look at how much of that is used by the restaurant sector, how much by the food processing sector, how much goes directly to consumers. Because we're dividing up into sectors, this allows us to more easily determine which sectors have opportunities for export promotion, which sectors have opportunities for import substitution, where you could maybe be making the inputs for for that sector locally rather than importing them.
So what are the most significant results you get out of that research?
Vietnam has signed many free trade agreements in recent years, and it is becoming very confusing. There's a risk of what we call a noodle bowl situation, where there are so many overlapping and interlocking agreements that the people who need to use the agreements, the entrepreneurs and businessmen, can't actually keep track of which agreements they should be taking advantage of. So one of our main results is to identify which of the free trade agreements that Vietnam is signing have the greatest potential for increasing future growth in the Vietnamese economy. And we've identified those as being the ASEAN Economic Community, the Vietnam-European Union Free Trade Agreement, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Are there any overlapping areas among these three key free trade agreements?
The ASEAN Economic Community is a very regional free trade agreement and is quite a tight agreement in the sense that it involves eliminating, most barriers to trade, and eventually it's hoped even eliminating barriers to the movement of labour between ASEAN countries. The Vietnam-EU agreement is a more traditional free trade agreement between two sort of fairly distant trading relations, but it's worth noting that it is the first agreement that the EU has signed with a developing nation. And the Trans-Pacific Partnership is really a new kind of agreement. It involves a wide variety of different countries, both culturally and in terms of economic structure. But it's also specifically designed to encourage the formation of global value chains. So and that makes it very different from traditional free trade agreements in many ways.
Let's now focus more on TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Which key economic sectors of Vietnam are likely to benefit from TPP?
We've identified the key sectors, again, being the ones with the greatest opportunity for growth, as being the clothing industry, footwear, and furniture production.
According to the Ministry of Industry and Trade, Vietnam can save up to $1 billion per year in import taxes on textile products when the TPP takes effect. However, it only occurs when Vietnam imports raw materials from other TPP countries. Currently, nearly 90% of input materials for textiles in Vietnam come from countries outside of the TPP. The rule of origin in TPP on furniture products also poses a big challenge for Vietnamese businesses, as more than 80% of wood used in the sector are imported. Some companies are aware of this, so they started to grow their own forest to be more independent.
Gần 10 năm trước với những cái chương trình trồng rừng và đầu tư lớn của chúng tôi, thì hiện nay chúng tôi đang có 14.000 hectare rừng, đang trong giai đoạn thu hoạch luân kỳ, và trong năm ngoái thì chúng tôi đã có thu hoạch và có những cái kết quả là rất tốt.
According to Dr. Scott's research, from 2005 to 2014, pre-TPP end of negotiation, Vietnam topped the chart of textile export with nearly $20 billion revenue in 2014. Vietnam also ranked first among the 12 TPP countries in exporting footwear with over $8 billion export revenue in the same year.
Of all of these sectors you just mentioned, Vietnam has received quite positive results from 2005 until 2014.
Yes.
And that was before Vietnam joined the TPP.
Yes.
So how will becoming a part of TPP benefit those sectors?
Past free trade agreements have had the effect of encouraging the formation of global value chains, which means increasingly each stage of the production process can potentially be in a different country. So you can see, for example, looking at the data on the garment industry, that as Vietnam's exports of garments have increased, its imports of the semi-finished goods required, which is mostly fabric, have also increased. The difference with the TPP is that it is specifically designed to encourage this process of forming international, global value chains, rather than it just being a sort of side effect, as it were. And it is also specifically designed to try and keep these value chains within the TPP. So in order to get the full advantage of the reduction in tariffs for exporting to the US, for example, the clothing manufactured in Vietnam would have to be manufactured using imports from other TPP countries, or using inputs that are produced locally here in Vietnam. Currently, most of the semi-finished goods come from outside the TPP. So we can expect increased imports, but we can also expect increases in the semi-finished goods being produced in Vietnam, or import substitutions, so that those goods can be sourced within TPP countries.
You have been mentioning the term global value chain. Could you explain the concept of this term, and why is it important for Vietnam to integrate deeper into the global value chain?
The idea of value chains is basically you start with the consumer and you trace the flow of money back through the economy, starting from where the final good is bought, and the flow of value forward through the economy. More traditional free trade agreements, what tended to happen is that the top and bottom of the value chain were broken up. So you would have the consumer would be, say, in the United States. The raw materials would come from a variety of countries, like a lot of cotton also comes from the United States. But the main part of the value chain would be, say, within Vietnam. The trend recently has been to improve efficiency of industries by breaking up the value chain more and more. So you might find in clothing, for example, that the fabric might come from China, the clothes would be sewed in Vietnam, but they would be buttonholed in, say, Malaysia or somewhere like that, and then they would be ironed in the US before they are then sold. It is the trend in international trade to break up these value chains more and more, and it improves efficiency. But also the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as I mentioned, is specifically designed to encourage this existing trend towards global value chains. So if Vietnam is going to take advantage of the opportunity that the TPP presents, it will need to pay a lot of attention to, where it's sourcing materials from earlier on in the value chain and where the value chain ends up.
From your pie chart, we learned that 90% of textile inputs and raw materials in Vietnam are actually imported from non-TPP member countries, and these cannot benefit from TPP. So what strategies should we implement in order to make some transition and benefit from this?
You have to ensure that the imports that you're using, the cloth, for example, either comes from within Vietnam or from another TPP country. For cotton, it's quite easy to find a source within the TPP. Both the United States and Australia are fairly significant producers of cotton, but there aren't a lot of really big producers of cloth within the TPP. So it may well make sense for Vietnam to sort of move a step further back in the value chain and also produce the cotton locally. And this gives an opportunity for other countries in the region, Thailand for example, who are in ASEAN but not in the TPP, to invest in Vietnam to build these industries so they can take advantage of the preferential tariffs.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying that Vietnam should encourage more investment from non-TPP countries into the country?
I think Vietnam should encourage foreign direct investment in general. The sectors of the economy that involve foreign investment tend to be the most productive sectors in Vietnam's economy. But I think many non-TP members are very eager to invest in Vietnam at the moment so that they can take advantage of these new TPP tariffs.
TPP requires member nations to use TPP member-produced material in order to receive access to duty-free goods. Products need to achieve a 55% localization rate, and enterprises are allowed to import a maximum of 45% of materials from outside the bloc.
Và về nguyên tắc ấy, thì khi một nhà máy được đầu tư, được đặt trụ sở ở nước nào thì cái sản phẩm đó được coi là xuất xứ tại nước đó. Cho nên khi chúng ta có nhà máy dệt dù là Trung Quốc, dù là Nhật Bản nhưng là làm ở Việt Nam thì vẫn coi là cái sản phẩm dệt đó được cung cấp tại Việt Nam.
The advantages of the TPP have attracted many foreign investors. The investments will bring many benefits to Vietnam, but they also come with challenges.
Ta sẽ vào, người ta mua hàng ở Việt Nam, người ta đưa về Mỹ hoặc người ta đưa sang Mỹ, hoặc cũng có doanh nghiệp mà nước ngoài họ vào Việt Nam và đầu tư để sản xuất ra những cái sản phẩm dệt may ở Việt Nam. Thì đối với Việt Nam thì chúng ta đều khuyến khích vì họ tạo ra công ăn việc làm.
Hợp tác đầu tư với đối tác nước ngoài để mà tranh thủ học hỏi, nhận chuyển giao công nghệ.
Chúng tôi là phải hợp tác với các doanh nghiệp nước ngoài để cùng chia nhau miếng bánh đấy. Mình không làm được một mình thì mình cùng với họ để hợp tác.
So for the non-TPP member countries, Vietnam should encourage more investment from them. What about other TPP countries? What strategy should Vietnam follow in order to integrate more?
In order to develop global value chains with other TPP countries, this is not something that will happen on its own. You really need to look at what does Vietnam currently import from outside of the TPP that they could substitute for TPP members? What do you export? What can you export to the TPP? You have extremely big and wealthy importers such as Japan and the United States. You have other developing nations but with very different kinds of economies such as Peru. You need to go through the value chain step by step. You need to look at the 12 countries involved and see, what can Peru provide, what can Chile provide, what can Mexico provide, and so on.
Once Vietnam can integrate more in the global value chain, what will be the next steps?
So in the short term, the three sectors we've identified, what they all have in common is that they all they're industries that take advantage of cheap labour. And right at the moment, that is Vietnam's main advantage within the TPP, that you have the cheapest labour. and you have a very large population compared to other TPP members. In the long term, of course, as the nation develops, labour will become more expensive because the Vietnamese people will become wealthier. Mm-hmm. This is what we all hope. Mm-hmm. So in the longer term, I think Vietnam's more fundamental advantages are in areas such as agriculture. Vietnam is sort of famously one of the most fertile places on the entire planet. So Vietnam should, in the slightly longer term, be concentrating a lot of effort into improving its industry in high-quality agricultural goods. And the TPP is an enormous opportunity there, because two members of the TPP, Australia and the United States, are leading countries in the world in agricultural management and agricultural technology. So you have an opportunity to import technology, for example, from Australia to improve the quality of your farming techniques and then go into higher value goods. In the short term, unfortunately, this will have a negative impact on certain parts of the agricultural sector. But in the long term, I think it's a huge opportunity for Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. To be able to set up links and connection, Vietnam really needs to work on its coordination capacity. What's your advice?
Part of the advantage of industrial sectors such as clothing is that it involves only a few government departments, the Ministry of Industry and Trade and the Ministry of Finance. If you look at something like tourism, for example, then you're also involving the Ministry of Culture, Sport and Tourism, the Ministry of Environment, right, and so on. So it involves a lot more coordination, and I think this is something that Vietnam can definitely work on, is improving coordination between ministries and also between the ministries at the central government level and the departments at the provincial level.
Dr. Scott Murray, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Calling for investment from countries outside of the TPP to strengthen the domestic manufacturing sector, engaging in the global value chain to benefit from economy of scale, and improving coordination between different sectors are some of the highlights of our discussion today. We hope that this might bring a new perspective for you about the TPP and how Vietnam can benefit from it. Happy Lunar New Year!
Chúc mừng năm mới an khang thịnh vượng.
And that wraps up this episode of Bizline. Thank you very much for being with us. Our shows are all online at vtv4.vn or youtube.com/vtv4go. Goodbye for now.